Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you to everyone who showed up today and those of you who are watching in the future. I'm happy to have you here with us. Today I'm going to be covering how we set proper expectations and boundaries with our clients. I'm sure that everyone here can attest to a scenario in the past where you had a difficult client that you were working with. And honestly, that's just kind of the part of the game, though, too. Like, you will run into those clients. I tell people I have about 1 to 2 clients a year that end up becoming kind of my problem child. And that's going to happen no matter what. People will slip through the cracks. But in this call, I'm going to be talking about how we try to screen for that. And then how we also set proper expectations with our clients so that they actually have a good experience. If you've been following for the last 3 weeks, this is my fourth and final week, at least as of now. First week, I covered my marketing strategy. Second week covered the initial client phone conversation. Last week, I can't remember off the top of the head, but here we are today talking about boundaries and expectations. So if you did pay attention to the initial client phone call, how I have that, what I really structure in that is things that I'm going to talk about later. When I meet with a client initially, my job is at that point to figure out a little bit more about their situation, what they need to expect as they are approaching the market, and then setting some boundaries as to how it is I operate and how we go through things. If you look at my online reviews, I have over 255-star reviews. I think a very good reason for that is because I set proper expectations and boundaries with my clients up front. I want it to be the game that I play. I know there are a lot of agents out there in the past that would just go out there and meet a client at the house for the first time. And in my opinion, that's really setting yourself up for failure, because there's going to be questions that come up in the transaction. And if you're not answering those questions before they come up, they're going to have a bad experience. It's not going to lead to as good of an experience working with you as their agent. So when I initially meet with a client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, it usually takes about 60 to 90 minutes of me filling them in on everything that goes into that. And there's a few different reasons for that. One, I want them to know what they're getting into. Two, I don't want to run into a situation where there's another agent chirping in their ear about how they could have done it better. There's an old joke in real estate. How many agents does it take to sell a house? The answer is 1, but there's going to be 7 others that will say that they could have done a better job. Kai has less to say today. But my job when I talk to these clients is to show them that I am the expert, that I know what I'm getting into, and I know how to explain it to them in an easy to understand way, but then also so that they can make good decisions as we approach the market. I don't want it to be a situation where I'm representing a buyer, for example, we get to a house and they're like, okay, we want to make an offer. And then they just tell me a number. I'm like, okay, well, I need to know what earnest money, closing costs, inspections, if we're asking for any home warranties, if there's anything else that we need to throw into that offer, because I tell my buyers that the offer is oftentimes one, not in the purchase price, but actually in the terms of the agreement that we're getting into there. So, personally, when I meet clients, if it's a buyer, I usually actually like to meet them at like a restaurant, coffee shop, or like a bar top here in town. I'm very well known in my area. If you pay attention to the first video I did a few weeks ago, I talk about my mobile office and how I like to set up shop at different restaurants and coffee shops. And so the staff always really knows me there, and we get served while at the same time we're going over this whole process. So when I first bring people in, I'm always going to share with them my about page, my reviews. The reason why I share those things with people is to establish who I am and my credibility. I was going to pull it up here, but I won't get too tied up in the weeds. Maybe if someone asks me, reminds me at the end, I'll go back and show it to you. But I want them to see, I show them my about page, my awards, my credentials, anything about me. I'm really just showing them my credentials so that they know that I know what I'm talking about. And then I always follow that up with my reviews, and I tell them I'm actually more proud of these reviews because it shows that my clients are having a good experience. My core values, everyone should make a list of their own 3 core values, are education, communication, and responsiveness. They show up in every way I run my business. They show up in every way in which I go about my life as well. And when I meet with clients, I want them to feel that they are being educated, that I'm explaining in an easy to understand way so that they're not going to make mistakes. And if they need me, I'm pretty responsive. Responsiveness is part of the boundaries, though. I say responsiveness does not mean immediate, right? There are situations in my life where I'm with another client. If I'm meeting a client for the first time, that might be an hour, hour and a half presentation with them, and I got to make sure I'm present for them. If I'm, at the gym, I'm not going to be answering my phone. most of the time, right? I'm in a fitness class anyways. Other things in life, I want them to understand that I'm not going to be making myself available on a whim, but I do respond quickly. And if someone does message me and I am available, I will respond to them. But responsiveness does not mean immediate. This is not add house to cart and it's going to show up in an Amazon box in 2 days. That's not the way that this works, right? And the same thing works with me as a real estate agent, because I am living my own life in this, and I have lots of other clients. I know a lot of the people who are watching this here have known me for years now, but I usually take off where I'm not in my market about a week every single year. So setting that boundary with clients up front that, hey, you work a 9-to-5 job, or you have a job where when you're off, you don't have to work anymore. I work every day. I don't work all the time every day, but I work every day in some capacity, right? So if I'm going to be out of the market, if I'm going to be out in Blue Ridge Parkway, I'm going to be out hiking in Colorado, I'm going to be in Cabo, whatever it is, I need people to understand that I am still working when I'm there. I just might not be present in the market. I do have people who are going to help them look at houses or show the house if it's a listing that I'm working. That are going to be available for them to help those things out. But I want them to know that I might not always be there, and I just ask that they respect that as part of, how it is I'm running my business. Most people get that, right? Especially when I explain to them that I usually take off 3 to 4 days a month where I'm not working. I will usually go 1 or 2 months where I don't, and then I will go off. In 2023, I was actually away from my market 16 weeks out of 52 weeks in a year. So I was, of course, still working, but it was one of those things where I set proper expectations and people were patient enough to wait for me to get home. Beautiful thing about today's day and age, you can do a lot of things with Zoom like what we are right now. So even if I'm on the road, I can still help people out. But when I invite people in initially, I show them a little bit about who I am, establish my credibility. I show them why it is that they need to listen to me. If it's a buyer, especially first-time home buyers, I'm going to be breaking down the different types of financing for them. Right? And not so that they know what type of financing they qualify for. That's a conversation for the lender. They're going to cover the numbers, the down payments, all those things. My job is to give them kind of a bird's eye view of those things. So I'm going to break down cash finance, cash purchases, traditional conventional, insured conventional, 3 to 5% down payments, FHA programs, USDA, VA loans, and contract for deeds. Even though I don't really do contract for deeds, I explain them to them because I don't want them to go on to imright.com or YouTube and someone told them that they can do a contract for deed when that's 1 in 300 houses will actually even consider a contract for deed. But I want to talk about it at that point so that they know that I talked about it, so that when their buddy's like, hey, why don't you do a contract for deed? And you're like, why didn't my realtor tell me about that? My goal with these initial consults is to show them I know the game. I can show them how the game is played. And then if they play it my way, they're going to have a much better experience, right? Part of this is setting the expectations up front so that when those things come up later on, like, oh, Alex told me about this, right? And every single time that the market meets the expectations that you set for them, it reinforces your credibility and their belief in you as their agent, and they feel much more, that you're competent. You know what you're doing. So different types of financing. For first-time home buyers, I'll be breaking down what makes up a mortgage payment. Because I tell my buyers, you can get the same payment on a $400,000 house as you do on a $450,000 house. It's going to depend on what the property taxes are. In fact, the very first question that a loan officer is going to ask me when you find a house that you like is, what are the property taxes? Then it's going to depend on homeowners insurance and mortgage insurance. Those are going to be the things that are going to affect your monthly mortgage payment, other than interest rate and down payment, of course, right? I tell my buyers that there's really only 2 numbers that I want them to worry about when they are getting ready to purchase a home, right? Number 1 is their out-of-pocket expenses. That's the money that they have to bring to the closing table, and then their monthly payment. The rest of it's all just noise. I mean, I'm sure everyone here can attest to a point where a buyer told them, I'm looking to buy a house at $400,000. And it's like, okay, well, how did you arrive at that? Did you talk to a bank? Did you get a lender? Well, no, that's just what me and my wife have discussed that we could afford, right? It's like, well, we might go out there and find something that's at $415 that you absolutely love, right? But the payment, because the taxes are lower, are actually going to be roughly what it would be at a $400,000 house. we're doing a few different things in there. We're kind of readjusting their perspective on what's going on in the market. A lot of people get really tied into zeros and fives. I want them to be thinking in twos and sevens. I want them to be understanding how things aren't necessarily as even as offering $400,000 for a property. What's going to matter is your out-of-pocket expenses and your monthly payment. But the first thing I'm going to cover with them is going to be the different types of financing. Then, because again, they're more likely to be competing with other buyers, I want to show them how it is that their insured conventional financing might pair up against a cash offer. How their insured conventional financing might pair up against an FHA offer, right? We won't know what the other offers are, but if we can give them some ideas on what it is we're looking at, and we're out looking at houses, and I'm like, oh, I see a little bit of peeling paint here. I see a loose railing over there. That's not a terrible thing, FHA. We can address those things on an FHA loan. We can get them fixed. We can put an escrow holdbacks, whatever it is we got to do in order to get that financing to work out. But if you're an insured conventional buyer, I know that it's more convenient for the seller to accept your offer over an FHA offer. So we just eliminate a good portion of the buyers in that price range that we're competing with, right? With my cash buyers, I got several cash buyers I'm working with right now. I tell them cash will get you the front of line and won't necessarily win you to the deal, right? The seller doesn't actually really care how it is you get your money. They just care that they get the money, right? Whether you get financing or cash. Our advantages to cash offers because they don't have to worry about appraisals. They don't have to worry about any financing contingencies. They don't have to worry about you losing your job, right? So there are benefits to that. We can also close a little bit sooner, let them live there a little bit longer. But cash doesn't necessarily win you the deal. It will get you the front of the line, right? And that's a big conversation. The Lyle's cash buyers, they think that, they're King Tut and the world kind of revolves around them. And you just got to really let them know that, hey, I need that proof of funds letter. This is how that works, right? But I want them to see how their different types of financing pairs up against the competition. Because in today's market where I'm at right now, you are more likely to compete with other buyers than you are to compete with the seller. And I want you to know why that's important. Of course, the understanding what makes up a mortgage payment is very critical for my first-time home buyers. It's one of the most stressful things in a home purchase is understanding what your monthly obligation is going to be. So I want to make sure they understand what goes into it, not what it is going to be. That's the lender's conversation. So another part of those boundaries that I'm talking about is I am a real estate agent. I handle the education, the contracts, the showing you the property. When issues come up in a transaction, I'm the shock absorber. I handle the problems that come up. The lender is going to be the one that you talk to about your down payment, your interest rate, your monthly payment, things like that. I just want to give you a perspective on what it is that they are going to be talking about. In addition to any sort of financing conversation, I always talk to buyers about the difference between a bank and a mortgage broker, right? A bank is going to have their rates, their terms, their costs that they're going to be handling in the midst of a transaction, whereas a mortgage broker works with a variety of different banks. So I have a few different mortgage brokers that I work with here, but what they'll do is they'll pull your income, your assets, your credit history, and I break down what that means to buyer. I'm probably not going to have time to go into all that today. And then they're going to shop around to a few different banks and see what they can do to get you a better deal on the financing. Whereas a bank is just going to have their rates, their terms, their costs. And a lot of bankers are paid salary, so they're not going to be answering the phone at 7 o'clock at night when you have an offer deadline at 8 o'clock. So I usually prefer to work with mortgage brokers over banks. I will work with any bank out there, even the ones I don't like. And but I try to explain to people the importance of working with a local lender in that regards, right? But as far as understanding financing too, if it's any sort of government program, FHA, USDA, VA loan, even the insured conventional and conventional financing are going to have guidelines that they're going to have to abide by in the secondary market. And you and I might know this, but the consumer doesn't. So we have to articulate why it is these underwriters are always hounding the loan officer and the loan officer is hounding you to get additional documents in after they get an accepted offer periodically. W-2s. Verification of income. What is this $180 payment that you're making every single month to this person on Venmo? These are conversations that the underwriter is going to be asking the loan officer, and the loan officer's job is to ask you as the borrower what this money is for. So don't get upset when you are doing an FHA loan, when the lender is asking you what where your money came from, what this payment is for here. This is something you have to understand. Why is this happening? Well, the loan officer is originating the loan with the bank. Between the bank and the loan officer is the underwriter, and that underwriter is there to make sure that they get everything the bank needs, because this bank is going to actually get the money. So they're going to fund your loan, get you the down payment, but then they're going to sell that mortgage in the secondary market. Right? And in order for them to meet those secondary market requirements, they're going to have to abide by their guidelines. Okay? So when you explain why these things are happening to people, when it comes up, they're much more understanding, and your loan officers will appreciate this a lot more too, because you set the expectation with the buyer up front so that they know what it is that they're getting into. Right? From there, how do we actually go out and look at properties? A lot of buyers are starting on Zillow and Trulia and Redfin and Homes.com and some of the third-party big blockbuster brokerage websites. Even I have a few of those. And a lot of those can be outdated or inaccurate, or maybe you have to search a little bit to see if the property is contingent or pending, right? And what I want my buyers to do is look at specific websites regularly. I tell them you are welcome to continue looking on Zillow and Redfin and all those things. Just understand sometimes there's some shady information on there. There's some inaccurate stuff. I usually tell people what I want them to do when they find a house that they like. I want them to go into it. I want them to find a property. I want them to screenshot that property and then text it over to me. Okay. So if they find something, I tell them go in there, screenshot it, text it to me. If you message me through the app, I might miss out on the information that you're sending to me because it is tied to the internet, and I might not have the internet. I want a group text from you guys, and then I can do research. But if you send me a link to Zillow or send me a link to Realtor, it's just going to take me to that website. It might not actually take me to that actual listing that you're interested in. I want to know exactly what we're getting in. Responsiveness is a core value, but in order for me to do that, I need you to make sure that you're getting me the information in an easy way, or a way that's going to actually get to me, right? All right, will you stop digging into the carpet? You are so silly. I know, hon. What is it talking about? Now we'll just move on. With showings, I usually tell people I'd rather you be late to a showing than early to a showing. If you show up early to a showing, you might run into the seller. It can be kind of awkward. Sometimes those things happen anyways. It's really super weird. I tell my sellers never to be at the property, but sometimes they are not my sellers, at least so far, right? But when they do that, it can be super weird. Be careful. You don't want to run into them. If you show up early, they might be getting in their vehicle and leaving. You might run into another agent and their buyer leaving the property at the same time. Personally, I would rather you be late than early, right? I tell my buyers, I'm going to give you a 10-minute grace. I'm going to ask you to give me a 5-minute grace as well, and understand that traffic does happen, and sometimes I might be a little bit later. I will let you know if I'm going to be more than 5 minutes late. I would just appreciate if you would let me know more that you're going to be more than 10 minutes late, right? But if I set that expectation with them up front that we have to give a little bit of grace and wiggle room there, people are much more appreciative of it. I also tell them when we get to showings, I like to walk around the outside of the house first. I want to be checking out the grade and where's water going to run. I'm looking at the siding, the roof, the windows, depending on if it's light outside, I can see these things. I am not an inspector. In fact, in my state of Minnesota, you actually don't have to have a license to be an inspector. But I am not an inspector. I've been doing enough inspections to be dangerous, but you should have a formal inspection to look over those things. My job is just to kind of point out the main big ticket items that I'm seeing. Then we go inside the house and you make sure you like the layout. I'll be looking at appliances and things like that as we go through. Aside from that, when we are in showings, I want my buyers to be very cautious of what it is that they are saying inside the house. Price, not just price, terms, and motivation, but also I don't want them to say something that could be insulting to the seller, because if you say something that's insulting to the seller, they might not want to work with us if you make an offer, because there are recording devices everywhere nowadays. Ring doorbells, security cameras, baby monitors, Alexa devices. Like, there are devices everywhere, and sellers are listening and they are watching. I know they are because my sellers tell me they are, and it is completely legal for them to do that. It is their home. So be careful what you are saying inside the house. Be careful what you are saying outside of the house. Understand that sometimes the seller is just next door, or there's a nosy neighbor who's watching in, or a family member next. And they might be watching what we are doing at that property to see if there's any interest. So I don't want you to say anything about what you're going to be offering, what your type of financing is. We'll have that conversation when you get in your car and you call me after the showing if you are in fact interested in that property, right? But I don't want someone to say something insulting either, not even if they're not interested in the property, but I might have another buyer that I'm representing who's looking at that property who also might feel like that seller might associate something you said with me when I'm out there with another client as well. So I ask people to just be cautious of what we're saying when we are actually at those properties. From there, how do we make a good competitive offer when you are ready? And I tell people right now, and probably from 2020 to 2022, when I got in that, I was like, this is really me just telling you a bunch of bad news, right? My market's really picked up here the last month, so we are seeing multiple offers, cash offers losing 20 grand over asking, giving away the entire farm. It's happening right now in my market. But I tell people I'm really just going to tell you a bunch of bad news right now to prepare you for it so that when you get out there, you'll realize what it is I'm talking about, right? First off, purchase price, closing costs, net to seller. I tell people the seller should really only care about what it is that they net. Well, they should really only care about their proceeds at closing, but the net sales price is what they worry about. When I represent sellers, I tell them, you should really only care about the net sales price and your estimate of proceeds through that. But to tell me my neighbor's house sold for $20,000 more down the street, why shouldn't we list it at that? I'm like, well, your neighbor's house did sell at that. It did appraise at that, but understand that they had $20,000 in closing costs that they gave to the buyers, right? So that house, the seller didn't actually net that full amount. The buyer chose to roll those closing costs into the buyer's financing. That's how I explain seller's contributions to buyer's closing costs. It's called seller's contributions to buyer's closing costs, but it's really just a way for the borrower to roll that money into the financing to pay for those costs at closing. Of course, when it comes to inspections and negotiations there, sometimes I'll ask for closing costs as opposed to repairs or a price reduction because then my buyer can save money that way, but it's a little in weeds. But net sales price, purchase price is going to depend on closing costs. It's going to depend on if we're asking for a home warranty, if there's any sort of commission deficiency, which is a very real conversation that I'm having with buyers right now about how that might be to their advantage if they pay a portion or all of my commission. They're going to be paying it anyways because they're the only one bringing money to the closing table, right? Buyers are the only one bringing money to the closing table. It's just how the net sales sheet at closing, the settlement statement states how things are getting paid. We write our commission as part of the purchase agreement and work it out that way. But sometimes there's a conversation I have to have in there about how that all works. No, sometimes, all the time, I'm having that conversation with my clients up front, always. Then what to expect with inspections. How long are we going to make that inspection? 7 days, 10 days, 14 days? Are we going to do a flash inspection and try to do it in 3 to 5 days? And the short answer to almost every question in real estate I tell people is it depends. If we're going into multiple offers and it's super busy, we might need to make some adjustments on what our offer is. If we go in and you're interested in a property and there's no other offers, I might be able to get us a better deal, right? Or at least some better terms, right? Depends on how long that house has been on the market, what we're seeing for activity, any other offers that are in there. So then inspections, earnest money, what should you be expecting for upfront costs? A lot of buyers, they don't really understand the money that they had to put down for earnest money, inspections, appraisals, any other fees that might come up in the midst of the transaction. And then finally, their out-of-pocket and their out-of-pocket expenses when they close, right? Closing date, why is that important? In my state, closing date is on the very first page of the purchase agreement. So I always tell buyers, sellers going to want to know when they're going to get their money. You're going to want to know when you get possession of that property. I do tell them about 1 in every 30 transactions. It seems like we do have a difference there between possession and closing. Sometimes the seller wants to have like a seller rent back. It does happen. And then from there, I'm going to talk about different, what I call asterisks. The escalation clauses. I'm not a really big believer in escalation clauses. I think it gives away a lot of what we're offering. Appraisal gap coverages. I first started using appraisal gap coverages in 2017, and then the market went crazy, and I started seeing them all the time in 2020 through 2022. And I would say they are back now, at least in my market. And then again, those commission deficiencies. So I want them to know all the various little things that can go into making an offer, right? From there, how quickly do we have to, once you get an accepted offer, do not go up and post on social media that you bought a house. This is day one of how long those days that we talked about in the financing category. I didn't cover with you guys, but how long it takes for a property to close, depending on the types of financing. This is day one. If you go out and tell the world you just bought a house, you have not. And if you do that, there's a very good chance that something bad's going to happen. My least favorite sister in my family, she got a house under contract, and then she went up on Facebook and told the world she bought a house. Day one, fell through about a week and a half later. she got exactly what she deserves, right? So do not, and anytime I've had a client do that, or I've been friends with a buyer who was buying one of my listings, posted on their social media that they're buying a house, I immediately contacted my assistant. And I'm like, hey, we need to be watching this file. 3 days later, the lender calls me and says we have to switch from insured conventional to FHA. And there were some items that we had to address on the FHA. We got it done, but my point to buyers is just don't go out and tell the world you bought a house. You can tell your family members and friends and everything that's going on like that. But this is day one of all those days that we have to work through. There's things that can come up, and roughly 30% of transactions do go through some sort of turbulence in the midst, right? Gosh, I really didn't even get a chance to go into my sellers so much here, but I'm going to continue with this line of thinking. From there, inspections, how do we handle inspections? I tell people you break it up in inspectors' jobs are to find everything wrong with that property. You are likely not buying a new house, so you need to be prepared that there are going to be issues with every house, right? This is what the world we live in. I tell them there's your 3 categories I want you to break things in. There's your honey to-do list. These are the items that you can take care of after closing. These are like the loose faucets, the railings, things like that. There may be the things that you want the seller to fix, but aren't necessarily deal breakers. These might be like electrical outlets being GFCI, right? Would be a really good example for that. Being mindful that, you know, the water heater's older and you might have to save some money down the road. And then there are the things that are like your deal breakers. High radon, furnaces is having issues. There's water indication in the basement. We might want to have like a drain tile system installed. Again, every situation, it depends, right? So what we do is I tell my buyers, I'd like you to keep it about 3 to 4 items when we ask for any repairs on an inspection contingency removal. And we submit that over to them. I tell them 3 because I know they're going to ask me for 5 to 7. And sometimes they're asking for the most ridiculous things, regardless of what it is that I suggest to them as an agent, right? I want this mirror replaced. All right, you can buy that at TJ Maxx for $100, but it's your call. It's not my decision to make. We do what our clients say, right? We represent clients, and it's ultimately they're the decision makers. Our job is to try to keep them reasonable in those situations. From there, when I do inspections, I usually try to ask for money as opposed to repairs, because if you have the seller do it, they're going to hire the cheapest person possible to do it. If you save the money at closing, you can hire your own people. They'll get it done that way. After the inspection is removed is when we order the appraisal if you have financing involved, right? I prepare them for what that might cost in my market, how long it takes for appraisal times to come in. Again, the short answer to every question in real estate is it depends. Sometimes it takes a week for the appraiser to get out there, a week to get back. Sometimes they get out there next day and we get it back next day, right? It really just depends on that. What they should be expecting for title work coming in there, what title work is, why it is important, and then explaining to them again, in this whole process, the lender is going to be asking you for information to verify that they can sell your loan in the secondary market, whatever bank it is that they ultimately end up working with, so they're prepared for it. Then, 3 days before closing, you're going to get a closing disclosure you got to sign from the lender. You'll get a loan estimate within 5 days of filling out your mortgage application. And I usually try to do my final walkthroughs about a day or 2 before closing so that if there's any problems that come up, I can address those things. I got a little bit of time to address those things. I don't like to do them like an hour before because then we can run into problems, right? And I also prepare them. A final walkthrough is not an inspection, just there to make sure the house is still there. They didn't take out anything. It's not an opportunity for you to go back and ask for a bunch of little nickel and dime items. Gosh, I really went too long on the buy side here. When I represent sellers, I'm going to go down to me. I tell them selling is a series of questions. First question that they ask me is, what is my home worth? Number 2 is, what repairs or updates should I be making to my property? Number 3 is, how do I prepare for showings? How do I stage this property? Number 4 is, what do I do with showings? I got the dog here. I got the kids. You know, I'm working from home. You know, how do I operate with showings? And then the next question is how do we handle offers as they come in? How do we negotiate those things? And then what to expect contract to close. My goal with my initial consultations is to set the expectations of what is going to be happening in the transaction overall, so that when those things happen, they're not like, my realtor never said that to me. This is why I feel my clients have such a better experience with me, is because I prepare them for what happens, and then that thing happens and they're just re-solidifying that I know what it is I'm talking about, and it increases my credibility, so that when they're talking to their friends, family members, coworkers about who to work with for a real estate agent, they're like, you should talk to Alex Mayer because he's going to make sure you understand everything up front. So I don't got a lot of time today. I got an offer appointment here at 11 o'clock that I got to run to, but I'll open it up for questions if anyone has anything right now. Thank you so much. Anyone, anything? Okay, everyone. Go get a new client. Have a great day. We'll sell some houses. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Audrey. Take it away.
If you'd like more information or to get connected to the Agent Power Huddle, join our free Facebook group. This call was designed for the agents in our EXP organization, but open to any agent from any brokerage. If you're a guest and you're interested in learning more about EXP or our specific resources within the Agent Collective, reach out to the person who invited you to this call to get more info. Produced by the Agent Collective Media Network.